Welcome, everyone. My name is Johannes Niederhauser. I'm joined today by Axel Molina and Tonatiuth Marron Gomez. Both these fine gentlemen I know as participants in our courses. I think Axel's been around for almost 2 years, and so has Tonatiuth. And something has emerged, which is Axel and I have recorded a few dialogues on memory. So Axel started thinking about memory last year, I think, during the early Greeks course. And Tonatiuth has been writing on, and you can find his talks also on this channel, on forgetting. But you could say has to do with memory. So you can introduce yourselves as well also. I'll read a passage in a second, as I just mentioned before. But you can maybe just summarize your work so far, or your current thoughts on the matter, and then we'll see what happens. Maybe Axel, you could start, and then Tonatiuth.
Yes, student of philosophy, and just it's been wonderful to explore memory. Memory, I'm really interested in memory, in what it means ontologically. The relationship between memory and being, and the phenomenology of memory, and how it is that memory relates to, let's say, intelligibility or sense, and that's kind of what I've been thinking about. I'm especially interested in how it is that things that have historical depth help us to understand or to investigate how it is that we understand things in light of the way that things were understood in other times, for example, and how that bleeds into our understanding of things in our current time. That's, I think, basically what I think about when I go for walks, which is what I do pretty much all the time when I'm not working.
Very good. I think, but it started though with, what was the initial thought that everything is made up of memories?
Yeah, the initial thought was that everything is made up of memories. And initially I was thinking of memories as sort of memory particles. And that later changed to be much more open. But I was just in this phenomenological exploration of things. I noticed that a lot of things were intelligible as what they were, or in light of how they were understood in other times. So I remember seeing, for example, military uniforms, like from old Soviet Russia. So there's some people collect them around here, and and thinking, well, it's interesting that this, for example, a hat that has a certain symbol on it is still intelligible as, in the way that it references or draws on the meaning of that time, the promises made, for example, by that particular utopia, by that particular dream, that future that never really came to be, and but still in our phenomenal experience of it still was sort of singing that song, the song of that utopia. It was still that future that never came to be was still present and imminent in some way. And that it was still announcing itself. and so in order, I was in the spirit of saving appearances and saving the phenomena, and not simply dismissing it as an illusion. I thought, well, this is something that I'm really seeing here, and what does it mean? How can I make sense of that? Or let's say, how can I understand that, or why would that be the case? And so I started thinking in terms of this gathering of memories as being something that is an essential part of the way that things are gathered or come to be or appear. And that was sort of the initial insight. And
yeah. Before we go to Tonatiuth, one is a bit simplified, perhaps, but is it fair, as the English would say, to say that Axel, are you still there? Yeah, there he is. Is it fair to say that it's moved from an imaginal or imaginary, say, account to one that is, I wouldn't say logical, but closer? Well, we can say logical is a broad category here, but one of broadly thinking, because I think this occurred during the German idealism time for you. Is that fair?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. So whereas before I was really thinking about memories as kind of reified particles of sensation or units of sensation that were merged together into kind of larger sensations. That moved into being more about the light of intelligibility, so to speak, from other times, casting shadows right into our current time.
Casting shadows. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the passage I'm about to read will be on this. So, Tonatiuth, feel free to introduce yourself also, anything to add, and your project.
Yes, I've been here with Johannes and his Halkyon courses since early Greek thinking, and this is where when I've been writing a lot of forgetting really begun at kind of at the end of my talk at this seminar. I made reference to two things. One is aletheia, the Greek word for truth. It contains the idea of forgetting in itself. The Lethe River is where the dead drink and forget everything. So this song called Silmen, or what it's an unforgetting, and the other is a reference to a short story by Jorge Luis Borges of Funes de Memorius that really gave me the idea of how the importance of forgetting in thinking. This idea that if you rely solely on memory to extract truth, you only get a series of particularities, always just kind of a clutter of information, and really removing details and forgetting, just only getting the most essential aspects is what can give you a true insight. I referenced the story with a very crude example that Funes is, when it's in his final stages, kind of his man almost gone. He says, I don't understand the numerical systems. Why does this number, it's called 33, and this is called this, and this is called that? And says, to me, it's more easy just to name particular names. No, so, this number, and it gives 7,000 something, it's named Napoleon, and this one is named Sol. It's this is kind of the absurd extreme of memory. Instead of truly just picking the small essential elements, you have to rely only on the information you have already gathered. The way we play with numbers, just to keep on this example, we don't know every number, but if we see a string of numbers, we know enough, we remember enough rules, positions, names, and can begin to deconstruct and keep active. I mean, I started in German idealism to focus on forgetting specifically for learning, or what Schelling said, the learning in learning. Memorizing is just to absorb ready-made knowledge, and memory becomes a negative condition. No, so it's forgetting what forces you to keep to turn whatever you read or whatever you make your own, and to turn it into something else. Turn, it says, not like I said, not just blocks to reassemble, but raw material to give it shape. Then.
Yeah, do you want to go on?
Well,
yeah.
So sorry, what did you say?
No, nothing.
Okay. Sorry.
Go on.
Well, yeah, I moved this from this and kind of trying to expand it not just to learning, but philosophical thinking. When we move on to Heidegger, that the idea of for Heidegger, the death is the concentration of how can I call it, withdrawing, for being, being. It's what makes being important and something to be contemplated, because it withdraws radically. In the same manner, for thinking, the act of thinking, it's important. It's important to keep it active, because we forget it. Why it is become any philosophical project is important? Because there is always a forgetting from one epoch to the next, and not really out of malice or incompetence. It's just kind of this natural progression. We reach this impasse of thinking, and then begin this project of forgetting, and then this is what calls us and forces us to begin again. So that's
to recollect.
Yes.
And one question, just for clarification, the short story by Borges, you mentioned it, if without forgetting, our memory, let's say, turns into a series of particularities. And did I get that right? And if not, just tell me. And would that mean, say, just a series of, for example, data points or images?
Yes.
Without context, almost, or Zusammenhang would be the German word. There's no sense to how they hang together.
Yes, correct. It is near the end, after the crazy story of the numbers, that Funes keeps elaborating and says that he sees, for example, he sees a dog in the morning, and it's sunny, and the dog is on his back, so resting, and then he sees in the afternoon walking, and says, well, you see two different things, two different data points. Why does it have the same name then? And it's the idea of so it's memory only gives you these fixed images of this of what something is. It doesn't give you, like you said, it doesn't give you context. It doesn't give you like just this abstract generality that can be moved from place or time. So it just kind of gives. So it can only, like I said on the early Greek things, it can give you the many, but never the one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very good. If you want to add something, just keep talking. If not, then I'll read. Actually, I've got 3 passages now. Because of what you just said, it's turned into 3. So I think I may have mentioned this before, and many will know about this. In Plato's dialogue, Phaedros, which I don't have here, I have to speak from memory, there's a story related on so Socrates, of course, is speaking at the moment, but it's it's a story from Egypt, and it's about the invention of writing, and the man who invents writing, Thamus, is extremely proud, of course, of his achievement, but the pharaoh tells him, the king tells him, that he's achieved something horrifying because it won't be. So the king is called Thamus, and it won't help recollection. Gedächtnis is the German word here, recollection, but it will only be good for Erinnerung, is how how Schleiermacher translated it in German. So we could say maybe something akin to a memory without context or so. So it's through writing that inner memory begins to disappear, or a lived memory or lived recollection, let's say, and a more, perhaps should we say, technical memorizing becomes possible. The Greek word, I think, is hyponeme. And it's, I think, also, just to mention this briefly, that if I'm not mistaken, that the Greek word mneme is related to mimesis, so to mimicry. Now I'm going to read the first paragraph from Aristotle's On Memory and Recollection. Our task is now to discuss memory and remembering, what it is, why it occurs, and to what part of the soul this affection and that of recollection belongs. Men who have good memories are not the same as those who are good at recollecting. In fact, generally speaking, the slow-witted have better memories, but the quick-witted and those who learn easily are better at recollecting. So that's that part. Now move on to anyone who's interested in memory will probably have heard about this book here, The Art of Memory by Francis Yates. And I'm going to read from a chapter on Giordano Bruno, serious heretic, probably the man who's to blame the most for the bursting open of the cosmos. The destruction of an Aristotelian continuum. And there's something, so we don't have to worry about the names in particular here. But what's important is that there seems to be a battle. And actually, and Frances Yates herself speaks of, she calls it thus in England, a battle was joined within memory. There was war in the psyche, and the issues at stake were vast. And it's not about old against new, but they were all modern. They were of the Renaissance. And I think it's a battle between the imaginary or the imaginal, the image, and the logical. So here's the quote. Dixon had, of course, been talking in his obscure Brunian fashion. He was a follower of Giordano Bruno, of the classical rule that images must be striking, active, unusual, and able to stir the memory emotionally. Perkins is the antithesis to this other fella. Perkins, who is, I think, a priest or a preacher, Perkins thinks that the use of such images is not only vastly inferior intellectually to logical disposition, but is also morally reprehensible. For such images must arouse the passions. And here he mentions Peter of Ravenna, who in his book on artificial memory has suggested the use of libidinous images to the young. So that would be a disregard of divine law by using images that are, we would say, pornographic, that help to generate artificial memory. So memory that's not experienced or doesn't come from experience, but that is artificially produced. And now here's the final passage I will read, and then I'll hand it over to whoever wants to respond first. This is, again, William Perkins, who was making an attack on the on artificial memory again, on the memory techniques. Mnemotechnicae, I think is the word, or so, mnemotechnics, which uses images to and attaches maybe numbers or stories or so to these images to remember, for example, the lines of Ovid or Homer. And in Athens, maybe to mention this briefly, these techniques are the techniques used by the sophists. So they can remember as much as possible to win in rhetorical games, to win arguments. So this is Perkins again. The artificial memory, which consists in places and images, will teach how to retain notions and memory easily and without labor. But it is not to be approved for the following reasons. First, the animation of the images, which is the key of memory, is impious because it calls up absurd thoughts, insolent prodigies, and the like, which stimulate and light up depraved carnal affections. Second, it burdens the mind and memory because it imposes a triple task on memory instead of one. First, the remembering of places, then of images, then of the thing to be spoken of. I'll end here. Whoever wants to go first with a comment or a thought on any of what's been discussed. Yeah, go ahead, Axel. Seems like you were first. I don't know.
Okay. I think the question of how it is that memory can be transmitted is relevant here. Is it possible for a memory to be transmitted to someone without them personally having experienced whatever the origin of that particular, let's say memory is? How do we determine whether an assembly or a recollection is purely artificial or not, right? Because, it seems to me that, the telling of a story, if you're listening to the story, can it self-transmit memory, the memory of the story? It seems that it depends on the degree to which the story is formalized and zapped of its poetic content. I think that the idea that that memories are something that are enclosed inside of a subject or a mind, I think, is kind of what's a question here. And from my perspective, that's not the case. I don't see it that way. I see memory. I don't really know that I see much of a difference between memory and just being, to be honest. So that's what comes to mind. But the religious sentiment there of not wanting to use images, I think there is maybe some wisdom in that, and in general, just when religions don't want to, for example, make images of the divine, because it seems like it's a practice to avoid, we could say, to avoid the reification of being with a Y, right? Or let's say openness, or that, right? The that origin of intelligibility, and I think that's the, as I see the war there between the image and the logical, is the war between openness and reification. Is the logical being trying to stay true to the source of intelligibility of the image, or that which gives life to the image itself, and then the image, and if the image takes over, then that's the well, that's when the access to the original source of intelligibility is lost. That's what I kind of think when I hear those two passages.
Excellent, thank you.
I'd like to comment on the sophists when you mentioned them with this how you call it, mnemotechnic, these techniques that you practice and make associations and so on, but to conjure the exact phrase from whether it's Plato or Homer or whoever, you see that here memory it becomes in technical terms more exact, but it loses its function. You just kind of try to make this correspondence, not even a correspondence with the content and the thing, but this reified thing to this another reified thing, and just it's like a play of connecting the dots, but you never have the possibility to look at content. No, you retrieve of, oh, Plato said this, but you don't use your memory to bring forth the words of Plato and truly parse them and for all you know, you can recite the Republic completely, but for all you know, Plato is a complete moron that never got anything right. But you cannot see it because you only have the intact piece of text, not really dwelling on the words that are said. The here memory should if not reified, can come to new production. And let's not forget, also going back again to the Greek mythology, the goddess of memory, or maybe Titan, Mnemosyne, gives birth to all the muses. So it's it's not because you get the best reciter of Virgil and Homer, but because of people who remember those things and produce new things on their own. Well, not that's what it is.
You want to keep going, or no? Axel, I think you looked like you wanted to respond.
Well, the that brings to mind, the idea, because a lot of people seem to understand is the idea of the dictionary, so the impotence of the dictionary, taken at face value as exhaustive. It's completely circular. Everything in there is defined in reference to if the dictionary itself contains all of its own answers, then it can't say anything, because you can never actually arrive to the meaning of a word. It just takes you to other places in the dictionary. Right? It's the network of a signification made completely explicit. Right.
But is it in any way? Maybe that's also a question for Tonatiuth. Redeemable? Not saying that it is necessarily. That we need, because there's the so-called art of building memory palaces. Is it in some sense necessary to learn? So the English language, I think, makes a distinction between learning by heart and learning by, what is the other? By rote. I think I learned about that very late in English, that there could be this difference, and by heart says something else than learning by rote, if that is actually the right term. I have to look that one up. I don't want to.
Yeah, rote memorization is.
Sorry, yeah, go on.
Yeah, rote memorization is just through repetition.
It's routine, isn't it? It's a routine.
Yes. Though I think that the difference maybe is not as pronounced. Maybe the difference in the way that those two were heard was larger before. Now it seems that they're almost interchangeable.
Yes, now they are. So when you say by heart, it actually means to memorize in a technical, mechanical manner. But my question is this: do we need that capacity, or is that always already, in a sense, not fruitful so one can remember all poems by Heinrich Heine or Hölderlin, or maybe I'm not making myself clear enough, but is there a difference between learning by heart, learning by rote? What would it be? Is there any place for memorizing? Maybe Tonatiuth can go first.
I mean, I don't think we can just discard memory altogether. I mean, otherwise you pretty much return to the place you started, and there can be I guess it can be certain how you say virtue on repetition if you do it if you take the time to appreciate the details of why noticing every repetition something you have not noticed before, like when you reread a book or you rewatch a movie and all the details come forward, but everything, but it's not the same experience. If you reach the point where you just are just absorbing the information just to spew it back, and that's when the reification comes from. It's kind of this. I think that I don't know if you have ever played this game when you were little, that you start saying one word over and over at some point and reach the point when it sounds like you're saying something nonsense, no, even if the sound is exactly the same. And that phenomenon, I think it's called syntactic satiation, I think it's called, or the idea that your brain is active when you hear a word. Your brain is actively trying to absorb every bit of meaning, maybe the tone somebody says it, the intentionality, and so. But when it comes sufficient repetition, your brain is like, okay, I'm not getting anything out of this, so it just enters the sound and just sounds like a bunch of gibberish.
Yeah, I think you said something very important. If I remember correctly, that I'll rephrase it because I don't remember fully, but it's our way of, you could almost say, recollecting our own memory or responding to our own memory, that we can either reify our memories or let something come. I mean, memories, and that's, when we say memorized texts or poems or so, or so we can either reify them or let them come to life again. There's nothing wrong with repetition, but is it? I don't know. What do you mean? Do you mean that it's maybe more of that makes sense, a thinking stance or access to recollection and memory than a mere almost mechanical repetition? Fichte, by the way, makes a distinction between mechanical Gedächtnis, mechanisches Gedächtnis, and living Gedächtnis, living recollection, in the Wissenschaftslehre. And Fichte wrote the Wissenschaftslehre anew every year to teach it again. He wrote a new version of it every year from memory.
And I imagine that every new edition of his book wasn't the exact same every time.
Exactly, it was new every time. Yeah,
the series is the interplay with memory, but with an authentic thinking.
Yes. So that's what you were arguing for, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that's vastly different from, because we've mentioned this several times in seminars and other places, that there's so many science fiction or dystopian futuristic films that deal with memory, with human memory, and it's usually memory just as data. The silliest one of them is Johnny Mnemonics or so, with Keanu Reeves.
Oh yeah, Johnny Mnemonic. Yeah.
Yeah. Matrix, of course, also. I mean, the Matrix film is at heart also, I think, about memory and how, well, how we can manipulate the brain to memorize something that it did never, that someone never learned. When they say to them, we can just upload all kinds of karate and jiu-jitsu or so, take whatever techniques without learning. And there's something spooky though, and it's very strange. In Aristotle's metaphysics, there's a in which to him in his time is not spooky, but for us now is, which is that it is from memory that experience is formed. So if we live in a time where with these techniques, and Giordano Bruno had basically dreamt of a machine to generate memory. In his book on shadows, by the way, of the shadows of ideas. So if this is an epoch in which memories can be artificially produced through, let's say, flashy images, which are abundant, overstimulation, then that can produce certain experiences. Just, as a side note or so. But Axel, you can go in any direction, whatever your recollection leads you to.
I think the issue of fantasy, I think, is really interesting because our memory of fantastic stories, of fairy tales, for example, they are also part of the way in which things appear to us. And this is something that I really precisely started thinking about, when I started thinking about intelligibility bleeding, the light of intelligibility bleeding from one time to another, from that story time. Like Sherwood Forest, you were talking about Sherwood Forest, for example. So Sherwood Forest is imbued with the light of the story of Robin Hood.
Yes. Yeah.
Even if it never happened, or it could be, when for some children it could be the story of Hansel and Gretel. And so there's a way in which fantasy bleeds into reality as part of, let's say, the likely, or that's a clear example of how the likely isn't just what the possible, that futurity isn't simply just the possible, but it's more than that, because it includes also our memory of these stories, these fantastic stories.
I would say it also applies to our country that Axel and I, Mexico. You see the flag, the coat of arm of the flag. It's a reference to supposedly the mythical origin of the Aztecs, of their god sends them a message there where they should build what now it's Mexico City, and it puts an eagle devouring a snake. And now it's funny because, well, now the Spanish conversion to Catholicism has been thorough in Mexico. Nobody would say, "Oh, I have the revelation of Huitzilopochtli," but yet it's still infused kind of like in the collective memory of the people. No, it's all this symbol from a pre-Christian time. It's an identification for everybody.
Axel, maybe because I don't think you did. Thank you, Tash. I don't think you finished the story on Sherwood Forest. You mentioned it, but then Did you want to say more? It sounded like, but I can say a bit.
Yeah, go ahead. I think my point was just that the what bleeds into our intelligibility isn't just the what we call the real, but it's also fantasy forms part of that. So it is possible to artificially in a way generate or change the way in which things become intelligible through storytelling, through sort of intentional storytelling.
Yeah. So, but I think the reason why you bring it up is because it was in one of the lectures from the recent Heidegger course. It's not about the course, but it's something I mentioned in the lecture was the use of VR goggles in or at Sherwood Forest now. For anyone who wants to have them, they can put them on, walk through the forest along a guided tour, and see through these VR goggles Robin Hood and Marion and all the others in their camp and coming to life again. My question is this: so is there a distinction, or would you see a distinction between virtual reality fantasy and the fantasy, or maybe not even fantasy, because I don't know whether Robin Hood is not to say he's an authentic historical human being, but is there a distinction between VR Robin Hood walking through Sherwood Forest today and the story of Robin Hood at the time it began to be told as a legend of old, which, well, to a large degree, I would say, inspires genuine hope with the people that the unjust sheriff will find his maker, and that there are decent noblemen, I suppose that Robin Hood was probably noble, if anything, who will give back through charity and with the sword, of course, also. Do you think is there a distinction? I mean, I'm asking both of you. Maybe Axel can go first and then Tonatiuth. Or is there ultimately no distinction, which is letting them come to life in a different way, just with a different technology, which happens to be the technology of our day?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Now that when I heard you just explain it, I'm not sure that there is an essential difference as another storytelling technology, in the way that writing may be a storytelling technology. So yeah, it's I don't know really that there's a huge difference. Maybe the difference is just that it's not as it doesn't touch you as much, I think, when it's just given to you as when you're reading it or when you're listening to it. It just doesn't have the same. It doesn't touch the soul, so to speak. So that I think that the memory isn't transmitted as deeply. I think maybe that's the difference.
But that's a very significant difference, because what you're getting at is I was laying a bit of a trap by saying there's no difference. I think you said there's no difference, but actually there is this. So it was a bit of a trap in the question itself, which it tells us something. By the way, I make this explicit. I don't do this usually, but I may make it explicit now that I did this, because this is a way in which often discussions are framed, right? You lay a trap and then the mind goes there. But then when you actually start thinking, then you see the difference. And the difference, I think, is this, to pin it down. In one of the instances, there's this genuine secret and mystery around Robin Hood, what he looks like, where the camp is, who is Marion, how old is he, all of this, none of this is known. It's just the story of Robin Hood, which is not a problem to be solved, but is a mystery that's not given. And this is what you said, it's given. In the VR version of it, is everything is given. You don't have to. Now we come back to the problem of imagination. I don't think we can get into this tonight, but that is an issue. But in the story, when you hear it, you have to imagine Robin Hood yourself. There's a mystique, a fog, there's mist around this persona. And at the same time, that is perhaps what grants solace in a different way or at all, rather than in the VR version, which tells the story for you. Because storytelling and story listening, they're not the same, but they're one in a sense. They're not perfectly identical, but they come together. But in VR, there's no listening to the story. You're just taking it in. And it's so immersive, as it were, that everything disappears. But that's just my take. I want to hear what Tonatiuth has to say. Feel free to completely disagree with me, obviously.
Yeah, Robin Hood too. I would not that it's not limited to VR trying to make an image that completely removes the mystery of Robin Hood. It's something about its stupid Hollywood movies on Robin Hood, and you always see the smug trailer saying, "Forget what you think to know about Robin Hood," and it's always, don't take into consideration any mystery or any knowledge of a legend. Just it's just another action hero. As for the VR, I mean, it also depends how you tell a story. I mean, after all, it's just movies, or VR can be methods of storytelling. I guess if it respected, it's not. Oh, it's there. Here is the camp. Here is the bonfire. Whatever. No, if it added just an element of mystery, of not showing you completely who he is, or just maybe a silhouette in the distance or whatever. Also, it's a bit, I don't know, it's kind of odd that whatever the tourism board of some municipality in England is trying to, let's going to be an homage of a character whose whole point is that he was at odds with the local authorities and always trying to vest them. It's like it should say produced by the Sheriff of Nottingham when when showing this tour.
We have to hand it to the English, what they're really capable of, and that's a profound art of statesmanship, which is going a bit of a detour what we're talking about, but they are capable like no one else to include their rascals and outlaws into their own story. When you think about William Blake, for example, who was in his time very radical, the capacity to turn even those who will have been very critical, maybe even of the crown, into knights of the realm. That's magnificent. There's all, Marx went to England. He couldn't have been anywhere in Europe at the time. He wrote Das Kapital in London, of all places. Of course, where else would you write Das Kapital in the capital of capital? But you're right. Why are they doing it? And I think what we should mention with this extreme example of trying to bring something to life again, which is it's a dead story. Robin Hood doesn't. That's one of the things, right? It's resurrecting the dead. It isn't a story you can resurrect it through a Disney film or an action hero film, but it isn't ultimately one that speaks to us. No one says, I wish there was a Robin Hood, which is a bit sad. But the question is, why why resurrect the dead? And at the same time, I should mention that in this particular case, what the plan is to have robot dogs roam the forest as well to surveil the sustainable. So sustainability is all about control. Just as a side note, to control and surveil the forest basically, and its so-called health, and where it could be improved and optimized for future use and consumption. So that's not disconnected to me. That's connected. So to make a certain story available in that manner goes together with patrolling and controlling the forest for the sake of future consumption of that resurrected story. That is a zombie story at this point. It's not real to us. So not only has it lost its mystery, it's also lost its reality. It could, it would be almost more honest if they just showed, I don't know, a story of Tutankhamun or a foreign Aztec king or so in that forest, because what's the difference? They're both meaningless. I mean, all of them are to us. So that's the distinction I would make. Is the story telling us something or not in a genuine way? If it isn't, then that's where it gets a bit confusing. Anyways, who just wanted to say something? I saw someone's mic. Go on.
Well, in that sense, there is a far more honesty inside Disneyland. It's it's a park. Everybody there is an underpaid actor. Everything is made of plastic, but but made for maximum consumption and pleasing of the customers. Here is just let's pretend it is real, but let's put every square mile of the forest under control and make it de facto an amusement park.
Yeah, and the sad thing is, of course, that Disney is much closer to us than a real story, such as Robin Hood's story.
Also,
okay, maybe some closing thoughts. I have something I want to say in closing, but both of you, maybe Axel, do you want to go first? Because I think I know now how we can continue this next time. How the work can continue. Yeah.
I think it's interesting still that the story of Robin Hood was chosen, and I wonder why it was chosen. If it truly is completely dead, why not just some completely random, action sequences? So it seems like there's still something happening there. Maybe it seems like there's a parasitic relationship between this parasitic relationship between memory and Gestell. I think that it still needs the authentic memory in order to fuel itself, but at the same time undermines it. So I would expect that the story of Robin Hood that's presented in the VR world would be tinted with irony and very sort of silly comic relief, and zapped of its of its heaviness and its heartfeltness.
Ona?
Good that you mentioned Gestell. There is I guess there is this implied need of from Gestell to eventually becoming completely self-referential. It's just a story of a story of a story of copy, but it really never has that complete power. It always needs this authenticity. So this is I guess this memory is also this interplay of memory and forgetting is necessary to really know the limits of Gestell and see how not totalizing it is, although it wish it was.
That's excellent, because now, after what you've said, my initial closing remark would have been purely on the issue of the imagination and its place, let's say, within memory and recollection. But after Gestell, and there was a reference by Tonatiuth also to, so Axel, you called it a parasitic relationship between memory and Gestell, and Tonatiuth referred to what we could call with Baudrillard the simulacrum, a self-referentiality within itself, which works through the imaginary. So I think a self-referentiality that references itself ad infinitum and finds no point of even just no point of reference outside itself. So my suggestion would be that when we continue this, we try to think through that parasitic relationship of Gestell and memory, and with the imagination also, and maybe also bring in notions of the simulacrum, etc. That was very good, I have to say. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Gracias.
Thank you.
The one word. You know.
Gracias a usted.
Gracias a ustedes.